The tragic story of Harbor Hill, the real-life Great Gatsby mansion that vanished. You've heard the legends, the parties, the glamour, the world that F. Scott Fitzgerald turned into the Great Gatsby. But what if I told you that the real mansion, the one bigger, wilder, and richer than anything in the book, didn't just disappear, it was erased? Picture this. Early morning on Long Island. A cold fog crawls over the hills, and at the top of the highest one stands Harbor Hill, a house so massive it looked like a palace dropped straight out of France. 4 stories. Marble everything. A ballroom designed for kings. A home built only to prove one thing. We have more money than anyone else. But that dream didn't last, because behind the diamonds and champagne, something darker was happening. Something no one at those glittering parties ever talked about. A secret that slowly ate the house from the inside out. The family, the fortune, the entire world it stood for. And then, one day, the wrecking crews came. Not because of a fire. Not because time destroyed it, but because the people who built this palace couldn't escape the one disaster money couldn't fix. So the question is, how does the real-life Great Gatsby mansion go from the symbol of ultimate wealth to rubble nobody tried to save? And what really happened to the family who thought they could buy their way into immortality? The question hangs in the morning air. How does immortality crumble? Not from fire, not from time, from something wealth cannot outrun. If you enjoy uncovering the hidden histories of Gilded Age estates, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which mansion to explore next. Your support allows me to keep creating these in-depth investigations. The foundation holds. By spring 1901, Harbor Hill is no longer a promise. It is geometry. 4 stories climbing toward sky, walls thick enough to muffle storms, windows positioned to frame Long Island sound like paintings that change with light. Stanford White visits monthly. He walks the construction site in a long coat, hat tilted against wind, notebook always open. He does not smile at progress. He corrects angles, questions measurements, demands perfection in details no guest will ever see. The cornice, he says, pointing to the roofline. 3 inches lower. The foreman nods. 3 inches. $4,000 in labor to adjust. No one argues. White knows what Clarence and Catherine need. Not shelter, declaration. A house that speaks before anyone enters. European refinement meeting American ambition. Renaissance proportion executed at Gilded Age scale. The facade rises in Indiana limestone, 65 feet across the front. Corinthian columns frame the entrance, 18 feet tall, carved from single blocks. Capitals detailed with acanthus leaves that took Italian masons 3 weeks each to finish. Above the doorway, the Mackay family crest, hewn in relief, surrounded by laurel wreaths that catch afternoon sun like crowns. Not Gothic. Not Newport extravagance. Classical restraint with unstoppable confidence. Inside, the entry hall takes shape. Marble floors shipped from Carrara, white veined with gray, polished until it reflects chandeliers not yet hung. The staircase curves upward in a double helix. Oak banisters carved with grapevines, each step precisely 7 inches high, 11 inches deep. Engineered so a woman in an evening gown can ascend without glancing down. Catherine walks it in April 1901, hand trailing the unfinished rail. Perfect, she says. White watches from below. He knows she is right. The music room occupies the entire south wing. 40 feet long, 22 feet wide, ceilings vaulted to 16 feet at the crown. Acoustics calculated for chamber orchestras. Walls prepared for silk damask from Lion. Windows facing gardens not yet planted. A Steinway grand piano ordered, custom-built, rosewood frame, ivory keys. Delivery scheduled for completion day. The dining hall stretches opposite. Space for 60 guests without crowding. A fireplace tall enough to stand inside. Sconces for candles, though electric wiring runs behind every wall. Modern infrastructure hidden beneath classical surfaces. The table will be 24 feet of solid mahogany. Chairs upholstered in Venetian brocade. Clarence reviews costs weekly. Ledgers line his temporary office in Roslyn Village. He signs checks without hesitation. Limestone, $140,000. Marble, $85,000. Copper roofing, $62,000. Glass, imported Belgian, $38,000. Labor, skilled craftsman, 18 months, $290,000. Every dollar tracked, every expense justified. This is not waste. This is investment in permanence. By autumn 1901, the exterior is complete. Harbor Hill stands visible from the Sound, from the village, from neighboring estates. 4 stories of pale stone glowing in morning light. Copper roof oxidizing to soft green. Gardens marked but not yet planted. 180 acres reserved for terraces, fountains, rose arbors, reflecting pools fed by underground springs. Word spreads through the Gold Coast. The Mackays are building something extraordinary. Not larger than the Vanderbilt estate, not more ornate than the Guggenheim Palazzo, but somehow more confident. A house that does not apologize for ambition. A house that claims its hill the way monarchs claim thrones. Society takes notice. Invitations arrive for Clarence and Catherine before Harbor Hill is finished. Dinners at the Phipps's, garden parties at the Whitneys, weekend gatherings at estates Catherine's family once considered vulgar. Old New York softening toward new money, calculating whether Mackay wealth comes with acceptable polish. Catherine handles these events with practiced grace. She speaks French fluently, quotes Tennyson from memory, navigates conversational politics without visible effort. She is not trying to belong, she already does. Clarence learns slower. He is athletic, charming in small groups, but quieter in ballrooms. He prefers engineering discussions to gossip. He watches Catherine move through crowds and understands. She is the bridge between his father's silver and the world that matters here. Together they are becoming what they intended. East Coast aristocracy with Western fortunes. In December 1901, White approves the final interior details. Plasterers finish crown molding. Electricians wire the last chandeliers. Gardeners plant the first boxwood hedges along terraced paths. The fountain, 20 feet tall, Italian marble, water pumped from a reservoir 300 yards downhill, is tested and runs clear. Harbor Hill is ready. Move-in scheduled for March 1902. Catherine oversees furniture placement. Clarence arranges the library. First editions, leather-bound volumes. His father's mining maps framed beside Shakespeare folios. The nursery is prepared on the 3rd floor, though no children yet. Bedrooms for guests. Quarters for staff. A house built for dynasty. And on a cold morning in early March, they walk through empty rooms one final time before trunks arrive. Sunlight pours through Belgian glass. Marble echoes their footsteps. The staircase curves upward like a sculpture. Clarence turns to Catherine. "We did it." She nods. Her hand rests on his arm. In that moment, they believe stone can hold happiness. That wealth, applied with taste and care, can build something immune to time. That their children will walk these halls and their children's children, forever carrying forward the name Mackay carved above the door. The house is complete. The marriage has 19 years remaining. The house waits. March 1902. Harbor Hill stands finished, furnished, silent. Staff hired but not yet moved in. Rooms arranged but not yet lived in. A stage built. Lights hung, audience expected. Clarence and Catherine arrive on a Tuesday afternoon. 3 carriages, 12 trunks, a life condensed into leather and brass fittings. The staff lines the entrance, 22 people who will make this palace function. Butler, housekeeper, cook, kitchen maids, parlor maids, ladies' maid, valet, footmen, grooms, gardeners, groundskeepers. Names Clarence will learn slowly. Faces Catherine memorizes immediately. The butler, William Morrison, 47, trained in English estates, hired at Watts $200 annually. Roughly $42,000 today. He speaks in measured tones, moves without sound, knows how to make wealth look effortless. The housekeeper, Mrs. Adelaide Chen, 39, daughter of a Chinese railroad worker and an Irish seamstress, manages every domestic detail with precision that borders on clairvoyance. She knows which rooms need fires lit before guests wake, which linens require starching, when to order supplies before they run low. Catherine trusts her instantly. The first night, they dine alone. 60-foot table, two-place settings at one end. Morrison serves in white gloves. 4 courses prepared by a French chef imported from Manhattan. The meal is perfect, the silence enormous. Clarence looks at Catherine across candlelight. "We should host something," she nods. June, after the gardens mature. They plan their first gathering over dessert. 50 guests. Dinner followed by chamber music in the south wing. An introduction, not a spectacle. Gold Coast society needs to see Harbor Hill not as nouveau riche excess, but as cultural achievement. The invitations go out in April, engraved script on cream cardstock. Mr. and Mrs. Clarence Mackay request the pleasure of your company. Responses arrive within days. Everyone accepts. The Phippses, the Whitneys, the Guests, the Pratts. Old money, older names. Families who owned this shoreline when Mackay was still a name whispered in Nevada mining camps. They come curious, skeptical, ready to judge. June 14th, 1902. The evening Harbor Hill becomes real. Carriages arrive at dusk. Lanterns line the drive. Half a mile from gatehouse to entrance. Curved through woods Catherine insisted remain untouched. Guests emerge in silk and wool, diamonds and pearls. Eyes already measuring, calculating, comparing. Morrison greets each arrival. Footmen take coats. A string quartet plays Vivaldi in the entrance hall. The marble floor reflects candlelight like still water. Catherine descends the staircase in pale blue silk. No excessive jewelry. Sapphire earrings her grandmother wore. Hair arranged simply. She does not need to perform. The house performs for her. She greets each guest by name, asks after children, remembers previous conversations, guides them toward the drawing room where champagne waits in crystal older than the Republic. Clarence stands near the fireplace, awkward until someone asks about the foundation engineering. Then he relaxes. Explains load-bearing calculations, limestone density, the innovation's white design for earthquake resistance. Men lean in, interested despite themselves. Dinner at 8. The dining hall glows. 60 candles, no electric lights. Roses from the greenhouse arranged in silver bowls. Place cards in Catherine's own hand. Seating choreographed to avoid feuds, encourage conversations. Mix old blood with new money without obvious strategy. The meal, consommé, poached salmon, squab with truffle sauce, asparagus shipped from California, sorbet between courses, roasted duck, salad, cheese service, dessert tower built like architecture. Wine from Clarence's cellar, French vintages purchased through White's European contacts. Conversation flows, laughter rises. Mrs. Whitney compliments the acoustics. Mr. Phipps asks about the land acquisition. Someone mentions the new automobile garages, how Harbor Hill includes space for 6 cars, how the future is arriving faster than anyone expected. After dinner, they move to the music room. The quartet becomes a sextet. 2 violins, viola, cello, flute, piano. They perform Brahms, then Debussy, then a Gershwin piece so new most guests have never heard it. Catherine arranged this deliberately. Show them Harbor Hill. Understands both tradition and what comes next. The final guests leave past midnight. Carriages roll down the darkened drive. Voices fade into summer night. Morrison begins directing staff through cleanup. Catherine removes her earrings in the entrance hall, exhausted, exhilarated. Clarence finds her there. They loved it. They respected it, Catherine corrects. Love comes later. She is right. The invitations that follow prove it. Requests to visit, to host return gatherings, to include the Mackays in summer plans. By August, Harbor Hill is no longer the new estate. It is an establishment. September brings larger dinners. October, weekend house parties. November, a concert benefiting the New York Philharmonic. December, a Christmas reception for 200 guests, Local families, business associates, political figures, artists Catherine wants to support. The house fills with voices, music, purpose. Staff expands to 30. The wine cellar stocks 3,000 bottles. Guest bedrooms stay occupied more often than empty. The garage holds 4 cars now, soon 5. The gardens mature into sculpted terraces, roses blooming in sequences Catherine designed, so color never fades from June through October. Harbor Hill is not just built, it is alive. And for 3 years, from 1902 through 1905, it holds exactly what Clarence and Catherine dreamed. A place where fortune becomes culture, where Nevada silver transforms into East Coast legacy, where every room whispers the same promise. We belong here. We have always belonged here. They believe this completely. The first crack appears in 1906, not in limestone, in something no architect can reinforce. The crack is invisible at first. Harbor Hill functions perfectly through 1905. Dinners, concerts, weekend parties, the machinery of wealth running smooth as clockwork. Staff anticipates needs before they're spoken. Gardens bloom on schedule. The Mackay name rises in society columns, always accompanied by descriptions of elegance, taste, cultural refinement. But something shifts in 1906. Catherine begins traveling without Clarence. Not scandalous departures, respectable trips. Suffrage meetings in Manhattan, speaking engagements in Boston, gatherings organized by women who believe the vote matters more than the guest list. She returns to Harbor Hill after 3 days, 5 days, once an entire week. Clarence says nothing. He hosts business associates in her absence, discusses telegraph expansion, transatlantic cable investments, the infrastructure that built his fortune. He is good at this, better than ballroom conversations. These men speak his language: profit, innovation, systems that connect continents. But Harbor Hill feels different when Catherine is gone. Too large, too quiet. Rooms designed for cultural gatherings echo with emptiness when only Clarence walks them. Mrs. Chen notices. Morrison notices. The staff knows before Clarence admits it to himself. The marriage is functioning, but it is no longer rising. By 1907, the travel increases. Catherine spends March in Washington attending congressional hearings on women's suffrage. April in Philadelphia organizing rallies. May back at Harbor Hill, hosting a garden party for 200 guests, performing her role flawlessly before disappearing again in June. Clarence throws himself into work. Postal Telegraph Company, commercial cable company, investments that extend his father's empire into the 20th century. He leaves Harbor Hill before dawn, returns after dinner. Sometimes he sleeps in the Manhattan office rather than make the journey home. The house runs without them. Staff maintains routines. Gardens are tended. Dust never settles. Fires are lit in empty rooms. The dining table seats 60, but some weeks no one sits there at all. In August 1907, Catherine hosts a suffrage fundraiser at Harbor Hill. 200 women, no men except servants. They gather in the music room, the drawing room, the terraced gardens. Speeches about voting rights, equality, the future women will build when given political voice. Clarence stays in Manhattan that weekend, not forbidden from attending, not asked to leave, simply absent. Society notices. Whispers begin circulating, nothing definitive, nothing printed, but the kind of observations that travel through parlors faster than telegrams. The Mackays are busy, the Mackays have separate interests, the Mackays are modern in their independence. Polite language for a marriage cooling. 1908 brings children. Finally, Ellen is born in April. Catherine recovers quickly, hires a nanny, returns to her work within months. Clarence is tender with the baby, uncertain, careful in ways he never is with business. He holds Ellen in the nursery at dawn before leaving for the city, this tiny life that somehow makes Harbor Hill feel both more purposeful and more fragile. Catherine loves her daughter fiercely, but motherhood does not slow her. She speaks at rallies with Ellen in a bassinet backstage. She organizes meetings while nursing. The house adapts. The third floor becomes more nursery than guest quarters. Staff shifts to include wet nurses and nannies. Routines bend around this small person who demands attention in ways society events never did. For a moment, the crack seems to close. Shared purpose, shared focus, shared joy in watching Ellen grow. But by 1909, the distance returns. Catherine accepts a speaking tour, 8 cities in 3 weeks. Clarence asks her not to go. Not a command, a request. They have a daughter now. Harbor Hill needs her presence. He needs her presence. Catherine goes anyway. She returns to find Clarence hosting a business dinner without her. 12 men, cigars, brandy, conversations about copper futures and stock margins. The kind of gathering Catherine once helped orchestrate, smoothed with her social intelligence, elevated beyond mere transaction. Now it happens without her. Neither apologizes. They simply occupy Harbor Hill in parallel. Same rooms, same routines, same carefully maintained surface. To guess nothing has changed, the Mackays still host beautifully, still appear together at important events, still project the image of a power couple, fortune and culture united, but alone in the vast quiet between gatherings, they are drifting. Not dramatically, not with arguments or slammed doors. Just the slow, inexorable separation of two people who built a palace together and discovered they wanted to live in different worlds. Clarence wants dynasty, legacy measured in generations, Harbor Hill filled with children and grandchildren. The Mackay name carved into American aristocracy as permanently as the crest above the door. Catherine wants voice, impact measured in changed laws, women's votes, influence that extends beyond ballrooms into the structures of power itself. Both are valid. Both are worthy. Both cannot be contained by the same marriage. In December 1909, they host their annual Christmas reception. 300 guests. Orchestra in the music room. Champagne towers. Catherine in emerald silk. Clarence in formal tails. They move through the crowd together, touch hands occasionally, smile at shared jokes. No one suspects. The house performs flawlessly. But after the last guest leaves, after Morrison dims the lights and Mrs. Chen dismisses the staff, Catherine walks upstairs alone. Clarence remains in the library, reading telegrams, planning expansions, building empires in the silence of a home too large for the marriage it was meant to protect. The foundation still holds. The marriage does not. And Harbor Hill, built to last centuries, begins its first transformation, from dream house to monument to something harder to name. Loneliness dressed in limestone. Loneliness has a sound in large houses, not silence. Something underneath silence. The echo of rooms waiting for conversations that never arrive. Footsteps in hallways where two people pass without speaking. Doors closing softly, carefully, so no one can accuse anyone of anger. By 1910, Harbor Hill contains 2 separate lives. Catherine's schedule fills with purpose beyond parties. She chairs the Equal Franchise Society of New York, organizes rallies that draw thousands, writes articles for women's journals under her own name, arguments sharp enough that newspapers quote her, clergy condemn her, politicians cannot ignore her. She is becoming someone, not Mrs. Clarence Mackay, Catherine Duer Mackay, a voice, a force. Clarence watches from distance, pride mixed with something else, loss maybe. The recognition that the woman he married wanted more than he understood how to give. He focuses on what he knows. Business, expansion. The Postal Telegraph Company grows. 24,000 miles of cable by 1911, connecting continents, making communication instant in ways his father's generation could never imagine. He works 16-hour days, sleeps in the Manhattan office more than Harbor Hill. When he returns to Roslyn, Ellen is asleep. Catherine is preparing for another trip. The staff maintains routines that require neither of them. The house runs on its own momentum now. In March 1911, Catherine travels to Albany, testifying before the state legislature about suffrage. She is brilliant, calm, factual, devastating in her logic. Newspapers cover it. Some praise her eloquence. Others mock her audacity. All spell her name correctly. She stays in Albany for 2 weeks. Meetings, strategy sessions, late-night conversations with women who share her vision. She writes Clarence once, a brief letter about Ellen's health, a request to review household accounts, nothing about the work consuming her days. Clarence reads it in his office, folds it, files it with telegraph contracts. Summer 1911. Catherine hosts a suffrage garden party at Harbor Hill. 500 women, speeches, fundraising, a petition signing on tables arranged under elm trees. The event raises $12,000, roughly $380,000 today. Clarence is in London when it happens. Business negotiations. He reads about the party in a week-old New York Times someone left in his hotel lobby. He does not mention it when he returns, but society mentions it. Constantly. The whispers grow louder, not scandal yet. Observation. The Mackays live separately. Catherine pursues radical politics. Clarence works constantly. Their marriage is modern, meaning functional but cold. A partnership on paper, distance in practice. By 1912, separate bedrooms. Not unusual among wealthy couples, but significant. The kind of detail servants notice, society deduces, gossip columns hint at without stating directly. Mrs. Chen oversees two distinct households within one mansion. Catherine's wing, Clarence's wing. Separate schedules, separate meals when he's home, coordination only when guests require the appearance of unity. They still host together, still appear at important functions, still perform the marriage when performance is required, but alone they are strangers who share an address. In April 1912, Catherine boards a ship to England, suffrage conference in London. She will be gone 6 weeks, takes Ellen and a nanny, does not ask Clarence to join her. He learns about the trip from Morrison, who learned from Mrs. Chen, who learned from Catherine's lady's maid. This is how information travels now. Through staff, through silence, through the space between two people who once stood on a hill and believed stone could hold happiness. May 1912. Clarence dines alone at Harbor Hill. The 60-foot table, one setting. Morrison serves without comment. The meal is perfect. The silence is complete. After dinner, Clarence walks the grounds. The gardens Catherine designed are in full bloom. Roses, peonies, iris beds arranged in color sequences that shift weekly. The fountain runs clear, 20 feet of Italian marble catching moonlight. Everything is maintained. Nothing is used. He stands at the hilltop, looking toward the sound, and understands something he has been avoiding for 2 years. This house was built for a marriage that no longer exists. Not ended, not destroyed, just transformed into something it was never designed to hold. Catherine returns in June, energized, focused, carrying documents from the London conference. She speaks about alliances formed, strategies planned, the momentum building toward inevitable victory. Clarence listens from his study. Her voice carries through the halls. Passionate, alive, aimed at a future that does not include him. In July 1912, Catherine meets Dr. Joseph Blake at a suffrage fundraiser in Manhattan. He is 38, a surgeon, recently widowed, interested in women's rights in ways Clarence never learned to express. They talk for an hour, then 2, then exchange letters. Nothing scandalous, not yet. Just 2 people discovering they speak the same language. Society does not notice immediately. Catherine is always meeting people, organizing, networking. One more conversation at one more event means nothing. But by autumn, the letters continue. Meetings become more frequent. Suffrage work provides convenient cover for a friendship deepening into something neither planned but both recognize. In December 1912, Catherine tells Clarence she wants to spend Christmas in Manhattan, organizing a New Year's benefit. She will take Ellen. Harbor Hill can host his business associates if needed. Clarence does not argue, does not ask questions, does not demand she stay. He simply nods. And on Christmas morning, Harbor Hill is nearly empty. Staff present. No family, no gathering, no purpose. Morrison serves breakfast to Clarence alone. The dining room echoes. Decorations hang in unused rooms. The house built for dynasty contains one man reading telegrams, building empires, ignoring the truth crystallizing around him. His marriage is ending, not with explosions, with erosion. The kind that looks like nothing until everything has already changed. Erosion becomes collapse. Not slowly. Suddenly. The moment private distance becomes public scandal. January 1913. Catherine files for separation. Not divorce, not yet. Separation, a legal distinction that means everything to society, nothing to a marriage already dissolved. The papers are delivered to Clarence's Manhattan office by a lawyer he has never met, representing a wife who no longer speaks to him directly. He reads the document twice, sets it down, stares at the wall. Outside, the city moves. Telegraph lines hum with messages crossing oceans. His empire functions without pause. Inside, something breaks that money cannot repair. The news reaches society before it reaches newspapers. Parlor conversations, hushed tones, the machinery of gossip that runs faster than any telegraph Clarence ever built. Catherine Mackay has left. No, she's been gone for months with that doctor, Blake, the surgeon. Surely not. Why else would she file papers? The story breaks in the New York Times on January 18, 1913. Front page of the Society section, carefully worded, legally precise, devastating in its restraint. Mrs. Clarence H. Mackay files for separation. Prominent suffragist cites irreconcilable differences. Irreconcilable differences. Legal language for a marriage that died in increments too small to notice until the distance became unbridgeable. Harbor Hill becomes a problem overnight, not architecturally, socially. A palace built to showcase marital success now stands as monument to failure. Every party hosted there, every gathering carefully orchestrated to prove wealth could buy belonging, recontextualized as performance. Theater, a beautiful lie. Clarence retreats. Cancels engagements, stops hosting, stays in Manhattan for weeks at a time. When he returns to Roslyn, he occupies the library and his bedroom. The rest of the house goes dark. Morrison maintains routines. Mrs. Chen directs staff. But the energy drains. No guests to prepare for, no events to coordinate, just endless maintenance of rooms nobody uses. By March 1913, Catherine is gone completely. Moved to Manhattan, Ellen with her, custody uncontested. Clarence knows he cannot care for a 5-year-old while building empires, cannot compete with a mother who, despite everything, is present in ways he never learned. The separation becomes divorce proceedings by summer. Rare in 1913. Scandalous. The kind of failure that ends social standing, closes doors, erases names from invitation lists. Old New York does not forgive divorce. Does not accommodate broken marriages among families who claim permanence. The newspapers cover it obsessively. Not front-page news, not politics or war, but constant society page coverage. Every hearing, every filing, every statement from lawyers parsed for scandal. Catherine handles it with remarkable composure. Continues her suffrage work, appears at rallies, conferences, fundraisers, refuses to hide or apologize. She did not fail. The marriage failed. The distinction matters to her, even if society conflates the two. Clarence suffers differently, quieter. He stops attending social functions entirely, focuses on work with intensity that borders on obsession. The Postal Telegraph Company expands into South America. New cables laid, new contracts signed. He buries himself in the one thing that still makes sense. Numbers, systems. Infrastructure that works because it is designed to work. Unlike marriages built on assumptions that crumbled under scrutiny, the divorce finalizes in October 1914. Grounds, abandonment. Catherine left the marital home, refused to return. The legal framework requires fault, requires blame. The reality is more complex, but complexity does not fit court documents. Clarence is granted the divorce. Catherine keeps custody of Ellen. Financial settlement, $1 million, roughly $30 million today. Generous by any standard. Clarence does not contest it. Money is not the wound here. The wound is Harbor Hill itself. A house built for a marriage, for dynasty, for children who would inherit stone and legacy. Now it stands half empty, purpose dissolved, future uncertain. Clarence wanders it alone some nights. Walks the halls Catherine once filled with music and conversation. Stands in the ballroom where they hosted hundreds. Climbs the staircase they descended together on opening night, when everything seemed possible. The house remembers. But memory is not the same as life. Staff begins leaving, not fired, just drifting away. Maids find positions in active households. Footmen seek employment where there are guests to serve. By winter 1914, the staff shrinks from 30 to 18. Mrs. Chen stays. Morrison stays. The core remains. But the energy fades. Harbor Hill becomes what Clarence feared most. Not a ruin, not abandoned. Something harder to name. A palace without purpose. A monument to a dream that ended before the stone could fulfill its promise. In December 1914, Clarence stands in the library reviewing financial statements. Harbor Hill cost $180,000 annually to maintain. Roughly $5.4 million today. Staff salaries, groundskeeping, heating, repairs, taxes. A fortune spent to preserve a house he barely occupies. He could sell it. Dozens of families would pay millions for this estate. The land alone is worth a fortune, but selling means admitting defeat. Means acknowledging that his father's letter, build something worthy, something that will last, resulted in a palace that outlived the marriage it was meant to protect. He does not sell. Not yet. Instead, he sits in the library, alone, in a house designed for gatherings, and reads telegrams from cities where his cables connect people across oceans, while he cannot connect to anyone in the rooms around him. Outside, winter settles over Roslyn. Snow covers the gardens. The fountain is drained. Harbor Hill goes dark, except for the few rooms Clarence occupies. The house stands. The marriage does not. And the world outside is about to change in ways that will make both palace and pain feel like relics of a vanishing age. The palace waits. Harbor Hill through 1915 is a study in emptiness, 18 staff maintaining 50 rooms. Clarence visits on weekends sometimes. Often he remains in Manhattan, sleeping in his office, avoiding the echo of what he built. Then the world catches fire. August 1914. War erupts in Europe. Not America's war, not yet. But the tremors reach across the Atlantic, rattling markets, severing cable connections, transforming Clarence's business from expansion to crisis management overnight. His transatlantic telegraph lines become essential infrastructure. Military communications, diplomatic cables, news transmission. The Postal Telegraph Company operates 24 hours daily. Clarence oversees it personally. No time for grief, no space for dwelling on failed marriages. The work saves him. By 1916, America teeters toward involvement. Preparedness movement gains momentum. Training camps, fundraising drives, the wealthy organizing support before the government declares what everyone knows is coming. Clarence joins immediately. Not military service, he is 42, too old for trenches. But organizing, fundraising, logistics. The skills that built telegraph empires apply to wartime infrastructure. He coordinates communications between training facilities. Donates equipment. Opens his Manhattan office for planning meetings. And in April 1917, when America enters the war, Clarence makes an offer that transforms Harbor Hill completely. He donates the estate for wartime use. Not sold, not leased, donated. The grounds, the gardens, the terraces. Available for rallies, recruitment drives, training exercises, fundraising events. Whatever the war effort needs. The government accepts immediately. Harbor Hill becomes a stage for patriotism. Liberty Bond rallies on the South Lawn. Military bands performing in the music room. Recruitment officers setting up tables in the entrance hall. soldiers training in the meadows where guests once strolled during garden parties. The house fills with purpose again. Different purpose, but purpose nonetheless. Clarence is there constantly now, hosting French military officers touring American support facilities, organizing benefit concerts that raise hundreds of thousands for the Red Cross. Standing beside generals, senators, diplomats who need his resources, his connections, his willingness to give everything the moment requires. In June 1917, Marshal Joseph Joffre visits Harbor Hill, hero of the Marne, commander of French forces, touring America to rally support. Clarence hosts a reception for 500 guests, military officials, politicians, society figures who suddenly find patriotism fashionable. Joffre speaks in the music room, describes trench warfare, the courage of Allied soldiers, the desperate need for American resources. His words, translated by an aide, carry weight that silences even the most frivolous attendees. After the speech, Joffre shakes Clarence's hand. "This house serves France well." Clarence nods, does not mention that it served nothing for 3 years before war gave it meaning. Through 1917 and 1918, Harbor Hill operates as semi-public space, events nearly weekly. Staff expands again, not for domestic service, but for event coordination. Mrs. Chen manages logistics. Morrison directs visiting officials. The house adapts. Clarence finds something unexpected in this transformation: relief. Harbor Hill, built for private dynasty, now serves public purpose. The failure of his marriage becomes irrelevant when French generals stand in his ballroom praising American support. He stops seeing Catherine in empty rooms, stops hearing the ghost of conversations that ended years ago. The house fills with different voices now, urgent voices, voices focused on something larger than personal disappointment. In November 1918, the armistice is signed. News reaches Harbor Hill mid-morning. Clarence is reviewing supply contracts when Morrison enters the library, face carefully neutral but eyes bright. "Sir, the war is over." Clarence sets down his pen, stands, walks to the window overlooking the Sound. Over. 4 years of mechanized slaughter concluded by a signed document. Millions dead. Empires collapsed. The world permanently changed, and Harbor Hill served. Not as he intended, not as he designed, but served nonetheless. In December 1918, the French government awards Clarence the Legion of Honor for his support, his donations, his willingness to open his home when his country needed infrastructure the government could not provide quickly enough. The ceremony happens in Manhattan. French ambassador, military officials, press coverage. Clarence accepts the medal with appropriate humility, gives a brief speech about duty, service, the privilege of supporting Allied victory. The newspapers cover it positively. For the first time in 5 years, Clarence Mackay appears in print for something other than divorce proceedings. The narrative shifts. No longer the abandoned husband, now the patriotic philanthropist. The man who gave his palace to the war effort. Harbor Hill's reputation shifts with it. No longer the mansion of marital failure. Now a symbol of service, a place that mattered when mattering counted. But when the last event concludes, when the final military officer departs, when the staff clears the last Liberty Bond table from the entrance hall, a question remains. What now? The war gave Harbor Hill temporary purpose, filled its rooms with urgent necessity. But the war is over. The necessity has passed. And Clarence stands alone again in a palace built for a future that never arrived, trying to imagine what comes next for a house that survived the marriage it was meant to protect, served a war it never anticipated, and now faces a world changing faster than stone can adapt. The 20s are coming. Jazz, prohibition, new money, new rules. The Gilded Age is ending. The Gold Coast is transforming. And Harbor Hill, monument to a vanished dream, must decide what it becomes in an era that no longer believes in palaces. Clarence does not have an answer yet, but the bills keep arriving. $180,000 annually. Roughly $2.7 million today. The clock is ticking. The future arrives without mercy. Harbor Hill through the 1930s is a house dying in increments. Not abandoned, not ruined, just slowly emptied of everything that made it more than stone. The sale Clarence planned in 1929 does not happen. No buyers emerge. The Depression eliminates the market for Gilded Age palaces overnight. Who purchases a 50-room mansion when banks are failing? When breadlines stretch blocks? When the entire structure of wealth that supported these estates has collapsed? So, Harbor Hill remains, unsold, unsellable. A financial anchor dragging Clarence toward insolvency he can see approaching, but cannot avoid. He cuts deeper. By 1931, staff reduced to 8. Mrs. Chen manages with skeletal crew. Morrison oversees what cannot be postponed. Entire wings close permanently now. Dust sheets cover furniture. Shutters seal windows. The house contracts into itself, hibernating through crisis. The gardens go wild first. 16 gardeners reduced to 2. Terraces overgrow. Rose arbors tangle. The fountain stops running, $4,000 annually in pumping costs eliminated. The water basin fills with leaves, then algae, then becomes habitat for frogs that sing through summers Clarence no longer notices. Inside, the decay is subtler. Plaster cracks in unused rooms. Wallpaper peels where heating is discontinued. The copper roof develops leaks. Repairs cost $18,000. Money Clarence cannot spare, so buckets appear in third-floor hallways catching rainwater that stains ceiling frescoes painted by Italian masters. Anna leaves in 1932. The marriage dissolves quietly. No scandal this time. Just mutual recognition that living in a dying palace is unbearable for both of them. She returns to her career. Clarence does not contest it. He is alone again, this time permanently. By 1933, Clarence occupies only the library and one bedroom. The rest of Harbor Hill exists around him like a shell, present but irrelevant, maintained minimally, visited never. He is 59 years old. His telecommunications empire still functions, still generates income. But the Depression has transformed American business. New regulations, new competitors, new technologies emerging faster than he can adapt. The world is changing in ways his father's fortune cannot insulate against, and Harbor Hill drains everything. $95,000 annually by 1934. Half the peak cost, but still unsustainable. Clarence reviews ledgers monthly, searching for expenses to cut. But you cannot cut a palace to profitability. The house exists at a scale that requires vast wealth just to prevent collapse. Heat or let pipes freeze, repair the roof or let rain destroy interiors, pay skeleton staff or watch the house decay faster. Every choice is lose slower. In 1935, Clarence sells the last major artwork, a Gainsborough portrait Catherine selected in 1903. It hangs in the entrance hall for 32 years. One morning, art dealers arrive, remove it from the wall, carry it to a truck. The blank space on the wall remains. No money to repair the faded wallpaper behind it. Just emptiness where beauty used to hang. Clarence stands in the entrance hall after they leave, staring at the ghost outline. This is what Harbor Hill has become. A house of absences. His health declines through 1936, not dramatically. Just the accumulation of age, stress, the weight of maintaining something unmaintainable. His doctors recommend rest. He continues working. What else is there? By 1937, conversations begin about Harbor Hill's future. Quiet conversations. His lawyers, his financial advisors, the people managing an estate that will outlive him. The options are limited. Sell if a buyer appears. Donate to an institution if one will accept the burden. Or let it pass to creditors who will liquidate everything to recover debts. Clarence chooses none of these. Not yet. Some stubborn part of him still believes in waiting. One more year. One more chance for markets to recover, for buyers to emerge, for the world to return to something resembling the stability that built this palace. But the world does not return. The world only moves forward. Winter 1937 is brutal, cold beyond normal. The heating system, designed for full operation, struggles to warm the few rooms still occupied. Clarence sits in the library wearing an overcoat, reading telegraph reports, watching his breath fog in air that should not be this cold inside a mansion. The staff worries. Mrs. Chen brings him soup he does not finish. Morrison stokes fires that cannot heat the vast emptiness beyond the door. In February 1938, Clarence develops pneumonia. Not unusual for a man his age and his condition in a house this cold. He is moved to a hospital in Manhattan. Receives the best care money can still buy. It is not enough. Clarence Hungerford Mackay dies on November 12, 1938, at age 64. The newspapers cover it extensively. Telegraph pioneer, philanthropist, decorated veteran of the Great War effort. His accomplishments listed with appropriate respect. Harbor Hill is mentioned in every obituary. The palace he built, the dream that outlived the dreamer. His estate passes to executors who inherit an impossible problem. A mansion worth millions in a market that will not pay thousands. Maintenance costs that continue whether anyone occupies it or not. Debt accumulating faster than assets can cover. The executors are practical men. They understand numbers. They see what Clarence could not admit. Harbor Hill must go, not preserved, not donated, not saved. Demolished. The land sold. The materials liquidated. The only way to stop the hemorrhaging is to erase what causes it. The decision is made in early 1939, quietly, without ceremony. A palace that took 3 years to build will be scheduled for destruction the moment legal complications clear. Harbor Hill stands empty through 1939. No staff beyond one caretaker, no heat, no maintenance, just slow decay accelerating toward inevitable conclusion. The house waits for its execution, silent, patient. The Waystone always waits. Inside, rooms that hosted presidents and artists and suffragettes and generals grow dark. The staircase Catherine descended on opening night gathers dust. The ballroom where orchestras played stands hollow. The library where Clarence read his father's letter sits abandoned. Everything built to last centuries will not survive 4 decades. And outside, the world that killed Harbor Hill moves on without noticing what it destroyed. The house stands empty. 1939 becomes 1940. Harbor Hill waits for demolition that legal complications delay. Estate settlements, creditor negotiations, the bureaucratic machinery that determines how palaces die. Then the world catches fire again. September 1939. War returns to Europe. Not America's war initially. But the echoes are familiar. Markets shift. Industries mobilize. The nation that swore never again begins preparing for inevitable involvement. Harbor Hill's demolition is postponed. Not saved. Just delayed. Wartime shortages make large-scale demolition impractical. Steel needed for ships, not salvage. Labor needed for factories, not wrecking crews. The executors decide to wait until war ends. Materials become available. Demolition becomes economical again. So the mansion survives. Accidentally, temporarily. In 1941, America enters the war. The government requisitions properties for military use. Harbor Hill, positioned on Long Island's highest point with clear views of the Sound, becomes strategically valuable. The Army takes it over in January 1942, not as a palace, as infrastructure. The house becomes headquarters for coastal defense operations. Anti-aircraft installations appear on the South Lawn where Liberty Bond rallies happened 25 years earlier. Radar equipment is mounted on the roof. Barracks are constructed in the meadows where Catherine once designed rose gardens. Soldiers occupy rooms built for dynasty. Sleep in bedrooms designed for guests who never filled them. Eat in the dining hall where Clarence once hosted 60 at a table now removed. Sold, scattered. The transformation is total and unsentimental. Military efficiency erases residential elegance. Walls are painted olive drab. Floors reinforced with concrete. The ballroom becomes a communications center, radio equipment, telegraph stations. The technology Clarence built his fortune on, now repurposed for war. Harbor Hill serves again. Different war, different purpose. Same pattern of private wealth converted to public necessity. But this service destroys what it uses. The military does not maintain beauty. Paint peels, unreplaced, marble cracks under heavy equipment. The staircase Catherine descended in silk is damaged by soldiers hauling radio gear to upper floors. The entrance hall ceiling, Italian plasterwork that cost $30,000, develops cracks from vibrations of machinery installed above. By 1943, Harbor Hill is functional military facility, not mansion. The gardens are trampled. The fountain basin is filled with concrete and converted to equipment storage. Trees are cut to clear sight lines for anti-aircraft guns. The house is being erased by the service it provides. In 1945, the war ends. Japan surrenders in August. The soldiers leave Harbor Hill in September. Equipment is removed. Barracks dismantled. The military returns the property to its executors with bureaucratic efficiency and no sentiment. What they return is a shell. The structure stands. Foundations solid, walls intact. But the interiors are wrecked, not maliciously, just through use. 3 years of military occupation did what 30 years of wealth could not. Reduced Harbor Hill to infrastructure, stripped of everything that made it more than stone. The executors survey the damage. The cost to restore would exceed original construction. $3 million minimum, roughly $48 million today. Money no one will spend on a house the market did not want even before war ruined it. The decision is final now. No more delays. No more hoping for buyers or preservation societies or miracle interventions. Demolition, immediate, complete. The contract is signed in March 1946. A demolition company from New Jersey. They will take the building down, salvage what has value, clear the land for subdivision development. The executors will sell the lots, recover what they can, end this. Preparation begins in summer 1946. Salvage crews arrive first. They strip everything removable. Light fixtures, doorknobs, marble mantles, anything that can be sold separately. The house is harvested like a carcass. Chandeliers removed. Wood paneling pried from walls. The oak staircase dismantled step by step. What cannot be sold is simply discarded. Plasterwork smashed, wallpaper torn. Decades of craftsmanship destroyed in days because labor to preserve costs more than materials are worth. By autumn 1946, Harbor Hill is gutted. Empty rooms, bare walls, holes in floors where fixtures were removed. The skeleton of a palace waiting for final erasure. Local residents hear about the demolition. Some visit before it begins. Walk through the empty shell. Stand in the ballroom where nothing remains but echoes. Climb the ruined staircase. Look out windows that will soon be rubble. One elderly woman who attended parties here in 1905 writes in her diary, "Visited Harbor Hill today. Could not believe the devastation. How does something so grand become something so sad?" The question has no answer. Or too many answers. Market forces, changing tastes, depression, war, the simple fact that palaces require fortunes to maintain and fortunes are not permanent. In December 1946, the wrecking crews arrive. Heavy equipment, sledgehammers, cables and pulleys, men who demolish buildings the way surgeons perform amputations, efficiently, without emotional involvement, paid by the job. January 1947. The first walls come down, not slowly, not carefully. The Indiana limestone that took masons months to install is smashed in days. The copper roof is stripped and melted. The marble floors are jackhammered into pieces small enough to haul away. Harbor Hill does not collapse romantically. It is beaten down, section by section, floor by floor, until nothing architectural remains. Just foundation holes, debris piles, the hill scraped bare. By June 1947, it is finished. The palace is gone. The land is empty. 48 years from dream to dust. Not ruin, not abandonment, deliberate erasure, the kind that leaves nothing but memory and the question no one can answer satisfactorily. Why build something meant to last forever if forever is only 48 years? The dust settles slowly. Summer 1947. Where Harbor Hill stood, there is now emptiness. Not peaceful emptiness, violent emptiness. The kind that comes from erasure, not absence. Foundation holes remain. Concrete fragments. Shattered limestone scattered across dirt that once supported gardens, designed by the finest landscape architects money could hire. The hill is scarred, bulldozed flat in places. The highest point on Long Island's north shore reduced to development-ready parcels. Debris is hauled away in trucks, hundreds of loads. Marble, limestone, copper, wood, glass. Some sold to salvage yards, some dumped. Most simply disappears into the anonymous recycling of materials that outlive their original purpose. A few pieces survive with intention. The gate lodge still stands. Built as entry point to the estate, solid enough to function independently. A private family purchases it, converts it to a residence. It exists today, the only structure that remembers what it once served. The water tower remains, 60 feet tall, brick and stone. Too expensive to demolish for the value of its materials. It stands alone on the hill like a monument no one intended. Visible from miles away, a ghost limb of the estate that surrounded it. Fragments scatter further. A marble mantle appears in a home in Garden City. Salvaged, repurposed, installed above a fireplace without context. The family who owns it does not know it came from Harbor Hill. Just knows it is beautiful, old, well-crafted. Sections of wrought iron fence are sold to a cemetery in Queens. They enclose graves now, different purpose, same materials. Iron that once kept the public from Mackay gardens now separates the living from the dead. 3 Corinthian column capitals end up at a stone yard in New Jersey. They sit there for decades, eventually purchased by a restaurant owner who installs them as decorative elements. Diners eat beneath them. No plaques explain their origin. This is how palaces dissolve. Not into nothing, into everything. Scattered so completely that the original becomes irretrievable. By autumn 1947, the land is subdivided. 40 lots. Modest homes planned. Post-war housing boom. Veterans returning, starting families, needing affordable houses. The American Dream 1947 edition, built on the literal foundation of the American Dream, 1902 edition. The irony is not lost on everyone. A local newspaper runs an article in October 1947. Harbor Hill Estate becomes Roslyn Estates. New homes rise where Mackay Palace fell. The piece is brief. Mentions Clarence, Catherine, the wartime service, the demolition. Ends with a quote from the developer. This land will serve more families now than it ever did as a private estate. True, and sad, and inevitable. The first homes are built in 1948, small by comparison. 3 bedrooms, single story, designed for middle-class stability, not aristocratic display. They sell quickly. Families move in. Children play on hills where Clarence once walked alone. No one tells them about Harbor Hill. Why would they? The palace is gone. The past is irrelevant to people focused on building futures in affordable suburbs. But the hill remembers. Residents find things. Digging gardens, installing pools, expanding foundations. A piece of Italian marble. A copper pipe with Mackay estate markings. Fragments of Belgian glass. Artifacts surface like memories the land cannot fully bury. One family, excavating for a basement addition in 1953, uncovers a section of mosaic tile. 12 square feet. Intact. Blue and gold geometric pattern. They have no idea what room it came from. Keep it anyway. Install it in their entryway. A fragment of someone else's palace embedded in their modest home. Mrs. Chen lives until 1956. Dies in Manhattan at 85. Her obituary mentions 30 years of service to prominent Long Island families. does not name Harbor Hill specifically, but those who knew, knew. Morrison dies in 1951. Heart attack, quick. The kind of end he would have preferred, efficient, no prolonged suffering. His funeral is small. A few former staff attend. They remember Harbor Hill in the particular way servants remember estates, the work, the rhythms, the invisible labor that made grandeur possible. Catherine outlives the house by decades. She remarries after divorcing Clarence. Dr. Joseph Blake, the surgeon she met at a suffrage rally. They have a long, quiet marriage. She continues activism, writes, speaks, lives to see women vote, hold office, transform the world she fought to change. She never visits the empty hilltop where Harbor Hill stood, never speaks publicly about the palace or the marriage. When asked in a 1960 interview about her first marriage, she says only, "I was young, we both were. We built something beautiful that could not hold what we became." She dies in 1973 at 94. Her obituary focuses on suffrage work. Harbor Hill is mentioned in one sentence. The palace is a footnote to a life that mattered for larger reasons. Ellen, the daughter, lives until 1986. She becomes a writer, marries Irving Berlin, the composer, lives a creative life far removed from Gilded Age expectations. She is asked occasionally about Harbor Hill, remembers it vaguely. A large house where she lived briefly as a child, nothing more. The palace was her father's dream, not hers. By 1960, most people in Roslyn do not know Harbor Hill existed. The subdivision is simply Roslyn Estates. Nice neighborhood, good schools, property values stable. The past is invisible beneath present functionality. But the water tower still stands, alone on its hill, visible, inexplicable to those who do not know what it served. And on clear days, if you know where to look, you can find the terrace foundations. Overgrown, cracked, but there. Steps that led from the mansion to gardens that no longer exist. Stone remembering shape even when purpose is long gone. In 1975, a local historian publishes a small book, The Gold Coast Estates of Long Island. Harbor Hill receives 6 pages, photographs from 1905, floor plans, brief biography of Clarence and Catherine. The book sells modestly, mostly to libraries and historical societies. One reader living in Roslyn Estates realizes her home sits where Harbor Hill's south lawn once spread. She walks her property differently after that, aware of the ghost beneath, the palace her suburban house replaced. She plants roses, not because she knows Catherine designed rose gardens here, just because she likes roses. But the hill remembers. Even when no one tells it to, the hill forgets slowly. People forget faster. By 1980, Harbor Hill exists primarily in archives, photographs yellowing in historical societies, estate records filed in libraries, memories held by a shrinking number who saw it standing. But something else remembers. A novel, published in 1925, written by a man who never set foot in Harbor Hill but knew its world intimately. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. The connection is not direct. Fitzgerald never wrote "This is Harbor Hill," never mentioned Clarence or Catherine by name, but he lived on Long Island's North Shore in the early 1920s, attended parties at estates like Harbor Hill, observed the Gilded Age palaces and the people who built them, the desperate glamour, the marriages fracturing beneath wealth, the sense that an entire world was ending. His fictional mansion, Gatsby's palace built for a dream that couldn't last, echoes Harbor Hill in every dimension that matters. The location, the scale, the parties designed to prove something unprovable. The underlying tragedy of believing stone and money could hold love. And Gatsby's mansion is demolished too. The dream erased. Nothing left but questions that survive fact. The novel becomes canonical, required reading, studied, adapted. Millions know Gatsby's mansion. Almost no one knows Harbor Hill. The fiction outlives the fact. In 1992, a librarian in Roslyn discovers Harbor Hill photographs in a donated collection, creates a small exhibit at the local library. 40 people attend. mostly elderly residents who remember hearing about it from parents. One woman, 87, says quietly, "My father worked on the demolition crew. He said it took 6 months to erase what took 3 years to build. He never understood why." No one answers. The question has no satisfying answer. The exhibit runs 3 months. Then the photographs are filed away. Harbor Hill fades again. But the Great Gatsby is taught in every high school. The mansion lives in imagination. Specific enough to visualize, vague enough to become universal. Every reader pictures their own version of Gatsby's palace. Most picture something like Harbor Hill without knowing Harbor Hill ever existed. In 2013, a graduate student writes her thesis, "The Mansion That Became Myth, Harbor Hill and the Great Gatsby." She argues that Fitzgerald's novel inadvertently preserved what demolition destroyed: the emotional architecture of Gilded Age palaces, the dreams they represented, the tragedies they contained. Her thesis receives modest academic attention. Harbor Hill remains obscure outside specialized circles, but The Great Gatsby remains central to American culture. The story Fitzgerald invented feels truer than the actual lives that inspired it. In 2015, a bronze plaque is installed near the water tower, site of Harbor Hill, 1902-1947, estate of Clarence and Catherine Mackay, designed by Stanford White, one of Long Island's grandest Gilded Age mansions, demolished 1947. Only the water tower remains. 70 words summarizing a palace, a marriage, a dream that lasted less than a human lifetime. The plaque is accurate, also inadequate. Elsewhere in classrooms worldwide, students read about Gatsby's mansion. Picture the parties, feel the tragedy, understand the metaphor. They are reading about Harbor Hill without knowing it. Learning the lesson Clarence and Catherine lived. That stone cannot hold dreams, that wealth cannot purchase permanence, that everything built to last forever has an ending. The fiction teaches what the fact cannot, because the fact was demolished, scattered, erased so completely that only fiction remains to carry its truth forward. Gatsby is fiction. Harbor Hill was real. But which one survives? Survival is not what Clarence imagined, not dynasty, not the name carved in limestone enduring through centuries, not children walking halls that witnessed ancestors' triumphs. What survives is stranger, more scattered. The water tower stands, 60 feet of brick and stone. No function now, but too solid to justify demolition costs. Visible from Route 25A, a landmark without context. Photographers capture it at sunset, in fog. Post images online. Mysterious abandoned water tower. Relic of Long Island's past. This is not the immortality Clarence envisioned, but it is survival. The Gate Lodge functions quietly. A private home since 1948. The family knows vaguely it was part of some big estate. Children play in rooms that once housed staff. The past invisible to those living present lives. Fragments scatter further. A marble mantle in Garden City, wrought iron fence in a Queens cemetery, 3 Corinthian capitals in a New Jersey restaurant. Diners eat beneath them. No plaques explain. This is how palaces dissolve, not into nothing, into everything. Scattered so completely, the original becomes irretrievable. In 2018, a documentary filmmaker discovers Harbor Hill, finds 1905 photographs, interviews an elderly man whose grandfather worked demolition. He kept a piece of marble, used it as a doorstop for 50 years. They find it in his garage, 6 inches of Italian marble, one edge polished, the other broken. "You should donate it to a museum," he shrugs. "It's just a rock." But it is Harbor Hill, reduced to a doorstop, anonymous, functional. Survival without dignity, but survival nonetheless. The documentary screens in 2019. 70 people attend. A woman, 94, approaches afterward. "I was there, at a party, 1911. I was 8. I remember the fountain, the roses. So many roses." She closes her eyes. The fountain was taller than my father. Water caught sunlight like diamonds. Roses arranged pale pink to deep red, like music made visible, like someone planted a symphony. She opens her eyes. I've never forgotten it. This is what survives, not stone. Memory, held in a 94-year-old woman's mind. When she dies, this memory dies with her. But she remembered for 108 years. That counts as permanence. The documentary uploads to YouTube. A few thousand views. History enthusiasts, architecture students. In 2021, a California teacher uses it teaching The Great Gatsby. Shows students what inspired Fitzgerald's mansion. Real palaces collapse just like Gatsby's dream. One student writes, Gatsby's mansion feels like a warning. Harbor Hill proves the warning was right. This is transmission. How Harbor Hill survives despite destruction. Through story, through connection to fiction, through lessons taught to generations who never saw stone. Clarence built for dynasty. He achieved something different. A ghost that haunts American imagination. A palace that lives in absence. A story that matters because it ended. The water tower stands. The marble doorstop remains. The photograph's yellow. The memory fades in one mind, emerges in another. This is what stones could not hold. Not happiness, not marriage, not dynasty, but meaning. The kind that survives demolition because it never depended on stone. Harbor Hill is gone. The story continues. Not the survival Clarence wanted. But the survival Harbor Hill achieved. The story continues. But what does it teach? Harbor Hill was not destroyed by moral failure. Clarence was not cruel. Catherine was not frivolous. They built something beautiful with best intentions, finest materials, master craftsmen, employment for hundreds, cultural events, wartime service twice. They did everything right by the standards of their era, and still the palace fell. This is the lesson that unsettles. You can build perfectly and still lose everything. Market forces you cannot control. Economic collapses you cannot predict. Cultural shifts that make your palace irrelevant before the mortar cures. Harbor Hill teaches humility. Individual effort, however enormous, cannot overcome structural inevitability. But there is another lesson, hidden deeper. Harbor Hill mattered to the people who built it. The stonemasons who carved capitals, the gardeners who designed rose sequences, the servants who maintained impossible standards. Their labor was real, their craftsmanship was real. The beauty they created was real. That it was demolished does not erase the fact that it existed. Mrs. Chen managed that palace for 30 years. Her competence, her precision, her coordination skills, these mattered. They continued mattering after Harbor Hill fell because she carried them forward. The Italian masons who carved limestone learned techniques they taught apprentices who worked on buildings still standing. Harbor Hill is gone. Their knowledge endures. This is survival through dispersion, not the concentrated immortality Clarence wanted, but survival nonetheless. In 2022, an architectural historian publishes The Ghosts of the Gold Coast. Harbor Hill receives a full chapter. The book argues that demolished estates teach more valuable lessons than preserved ones. Preserved estates show us what endured, what was saved, what had institutional support at the right moment. Demolished estates show us what the market does to beauty when beauty becomes burden. What happens when no one fights hard enough soon enough? The default setting? Destruction. Harbor Hill's demolition helped inspire the preservation movement that saved later estates. Its loss taught lessons that prevented other losses. This is cold comfort, but it is something. In 2024, a theater company in Manhattan stages a play titled Harbor Hill. 2 acts. First act, 1902. The palace opening, everything rising, hopeful. Second act, 1947. The demolition. Workers dismantling stone, the past being erased. The play is intimate. 4 actors, minimal sets. The palace exists through language, not spectacle. Through what characters say about rooms we never see. It runs for 6 weeks. 75 people see it. Reviews note that Harbor Hill is too obscure for broad appeal. The play closes, but those 75 people carry Harbor Hill forward. Mention it in conversations. Reference it in arguments about preservation. Remember the final image, a worker holding marble, wondering whether to keep it or throw it away, finally tossing it onto the rubble pile. It's just stone. The audience gasps. Every performance, that moment. The recognition that we are always tossing away what we should keep. That we realize value only after destruction makes recovery impossible. This is the lesson Harbor Hill teaches most persistently. Not about architecture. About attention. About recognizing value before loss makes it obvious. About fighting for beauty while it still exists to be saved. The water tower stands. The documentaries circulate. The scholars write. The students learn. The plays close and reopen in different forms. And Harbor Hill, demolished 77 years ago, survives in the space between memory and meaning, between what was built and what endures, between stone that fell and stories that rise from rubble. Not the immortality Clarence wanted, but immortality nonetheless. The kind that matters because it was never guaranteed, the kind earned through loss rather than despite it. The lesson is clear. The question is, what now? Harbor Hill is gone, cannot be restored, cannot be rebuilt. That loss is permanent, but Harbor Hill is not alone in its trajectory. Right now, across America, Gilded Age estates teeter on the same edge Clarence faced in 1929. Maintenance costs rising, families unable to sustain them, markets indifferent to preservation. The same forces that killed Harbor Hill are active, patient, waiting. Some will be saved. Some are being saved right now. The difference between saved and demolished is not fate. It is intervention. Consider what was saved after Harbor Hill fell. Old Westbury Gardens, the Phipps Estate, donated rather than sold. Today, 200,000 visitors annually, preserved gardens, a palace that serves, Oheka Castle, Otto Kahn's mansion, nearly demolished in the 1980s. Saved by a developer who restored it as a hotel. Today, functioning, profitable, preserved. Sands Point Preserve, the Guggenheim Estate, saved by Nassau County in 1971. Now a public park. A palace that became communal. These survived because people intervened. Organized, fundraised, lobbied, created nonprofit structures. Found adaptive reuse models. Harbor Hill had no such advocates. By the time people considered saving it, the decision was already made. The lesson: wait too long and you lose the option to choose. Right now, estates need intervention. The Hearst Estate in Connecticut, threatened. Preservation groups organizing. Gilded Age mansions in Newport, structurally sound but underfunded. Museums operating on thin margins. Estates in the Hudson Valley, the Berkshires. Beautiful, historically significant, vulnerable. Harbor Hill cannot be saved. These can be. The mechanism is straightforward, not easy. But straightforward, awareness. People cannot fight for what they do not know exists. Documentation, photography, public education, making the case that these buildings matter beyond nostalgia. Legal protection. Historic designation prevents demolition without review. Gives preservationists time to organize alternatives. Adaptive reuse. Palaces cannot survive as private homes in modern economics, but they can function as museums, hotels, event spaces, educational centers. Public support. Tax incentives for preservation. Municipal funding. State and federal grants. Government mechanisms that subsidize preservation when political will exists. Individual action. Membership in historical societies. Donations to preservation nonprofits. Attendance at historic house museums. This is not romantic, not the grand gesture, just sustained practical work. Tedious, essential. The difference between what survives and what becomes Harbor Hill. You are part of this. Not abstract. Someone should do something, you. Visit historic estates, Entrance fees fund preservation budgets. Your attendance justifies staying open. Join historical societies. Small memberships aggregate into organizational power. Attend town meetings when historic properties face demolition. Speak. Your presence matters. Silence reads as apathy. Donate when preservation campaigns fundraise. $25 from 1,000 people equals $25,000 for emergency repairs. Write letters when historic buildings face threat. To town boards, zoning committees, preservation offices. Your letter becomes data justifying protection. This is mechanism, the unglamorous infrastructure of preservation. What separates estates that survive from estates that become Harbor Hill? The work is happening now. Dozens of estates operating on fundraising margins, grant deadlines, roof repairs they can barely afford. They will survive or fall based on whether enough people care enough to intervene. Harbor Hill fell because no one intervened in time. Because the mechanisms that now save estates did not exist yet. Because Clarence faced the crisis alone. We have those mechanisms now. Harbor Hill's loss helped create them. The question is whether we use what Harbor Hill's destruction taught us. Whether we learn, whether we act. Whether we perform the rescue Harbor Hill never received but made possible for everything after. The palace is gone. The lesson remains. The choice is yours. Save what can still be saved, before it becomes another Harbor Hill, another set of photographs, another story of beauty demolished because no one fought hard enough soon enough. Harbor Hill cannot be saved, but the next Harbor Hill can be. That rescue is yours to perform. The hill waits. Still the highest point on Long Island's North Shore. Still 220 feet above sea level. Still visible from the Sound on clear days. Empty for 77 years. Stand there today, where Harbor Hill once rose. The subdivision spreads around you. Modest homes, well-kept lawns, children playing. Normal American life built on the foundation of extraordinary American ambition. The water tower stands in the distance. 60 feet of brick. Purposeless, permanent. The only witness that remembers. If you know where to look, you find fragments. Terrace steps overgrown with ivy. Foundation pieces in someone's garden. Limestone in the soil. The bones of a palace scattered beneath suburban present. This is what remains. Not dynasty, not immortality, just traces. But the hill speaks in what it lost. Harbor Hill existed for 45 years. Real, solid, magnificent. People walked its halls. Orchestras performed. Catherine organized rallies that changed America. Clarence built infrastructure connecting continents. Workers earned wages, developed skills, built lives around impossible beauty. All of that was real. Demolition does not erase the fact of its existence. Harbor Hill mattered while it stood. Matters still in how its loss shaped what came after. The preservation laws, the museums. The estates saved because this demolition taught us to fight before losing becomes inevitable. The question from the beginning returns, how does the real-life Great Gatsby mansion go from symbol of ultimate wealth to rubble nobody tried to save? The answer, across decades. Through pressures no individual controls. Economic forces, cultural shifts, the mathematics of maintenance exceeding any reasonable willingness to pay. Clarence could not save Harbor Hill alone, but we inherited the future he could not build. We created the preservation mechanisms his loss inspired. Now, the question returns to us. The estates surviving today survive because people chose to save them. Every historic house museum exists because individuals organized, fundraised, lobbied, donated, attended. Harbor Hill is gone, but the impulse that built it survives. In every person who visits historic estates, joins preservation societies, donates to restoration funds, opposes demolition, teaches their children that old buildings connect us to lives lived before ours. Clarence built Harbor Hill to prove his family belonged, to establish permanence. He failed, the palace fell. But through failure, he created something larger, a lesson, A warning, a monument to impermanence that teaches more than permanence could, that we are temporary. Our buildings are temporary. Everything we create falls unless each generation chooses preservation. Harbor Hill fell because not enough people chose in time. The estates standing today stand because enough people chose differently. The estates threatened tomorrow will survive or fall based on choices made right now. The sun sets over Roslyn. Light falls across the subdivision. The water tower catches the last rays. A monument no one intended. And somewhere, in archives, memories, stories passed forward, Harbor Hill survives. Not as stone, as lesson. Save what we can while we can. Fight for beauty before loss makes fighting pointless. Recognize that immortality is not what we build, but what we preserve together. Clarence wanted his palace to last forever. It lasted 45 years. The story continues. Harbor Hill vanished. The work remains. Not every empire lasts, but every life, every dream, every fight to preserve what remains. These leave something behind. The hill is empty. The choice is yours. Save what can still be saved. End.